Hello again, everybody, and thank you for welcome and thank you for joining us today. I'm Melanie Beckett with Convey Compliance, and I am the host for today's webinar entitled The Ease of 1099 Reporting for Casinos. And with me today is Jeff Cronin with Convey and someone who you're probably very familiar with, Brian Farilla with Resort Advantage. Resort Advantage is our sponsor for today's event. In this webinar, we will cover tax information reporting compliance and form updates specifically for the casino industry. And before we start the event, I'd just like to let all of you know that you are on mute for the duration of the event, just in order to respect everybody's time and finish the event within 30 minutes. But if at any time you'd like to submit a question, please do so in the questions or the chat box on the right side of your WebEx panel. And with that, I would like to introduce Jeff Cronin with Convey Compliance. Jeff?
Thanks, Melanie. So I'd like to spend some time together talking a little bit about what's going on with the overall 1099 compliance environment and how that impacts casinos specifically. As we all know, the federal government and the states, in some cases literally states, they're all looking at ways that they can increase revenue collections without actually having to go through the legislative process of either increasing tax rates or eliminating tax deductions. So how are they attempting to do that? It turns out that requiring and collecting information reporting on income raises voluntary compliance rates to over 90%, actually over 99%. Overall, the U.S. has a little short of 90% voluntary compliance rate for tax reporting, for income reporting. They're also increasing penalties. They're beginning to fight on abatement processes. And there's a whole set of new reporting on foreign accounts. If you've not heard of FATCA in relation to casinos before, we'll spend a little bit of time today talking about the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, its implications for overseas entities is typically what people think of it as today. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about what that means for us as a U.S. casino marketplace. So if you're running a gaming institution in the United States, how does FATCA impact you? So first of all, penalty increases. The penalties for later incorrect returns, meaning penalties assessed because of the receipt of a bad name TIN combination, were all doubled in 2011, and the maximums were all doubled in 2011. So it is no longer the total amount that you can actually have to pay out in penalties is substantially increased over prior years. Obviously, one of the things that you should be looking at in verification in order to avoid that, there's two things we'd recommend you do. Actually, I did a webinar yesterday on this subject for a full hour just talking about identity verification. And that's on the Convey website if you want to pull that down and take a look at it. Will be under the B-Notice webinar. There are two ways to look at dealing with and eliminating your issues relating to penalties, and especially in relation to notices, which is the biggest thing that's of impact to us in this community. One is looking at doing an online TIN matching. Obviously, Convey and Resort Advantage think you should do that with us, but I would say I think you should do that with any provider, that if your providers that you're working with today don't offer online TIN matching, that maybe you need to consider looking at signing up to the IRS site yourself and running these yourselves. It is the single easiest way to eliminate receiving a penalty notice in the first place, to verify that the individual who you're making the 1099 out for or the W-2G out for provided you with their correct or at least a valid name and TIN. The second piece is OFAC verification, so the Office of Foreign Asset Control. Obviously, that we believe that should be integrated in the online TIN matching process, but that is something that you can also acquire and do a lookup on separately, and you should do prior to making a payment to anyone on the floor. And then the Death Master File verification. So one of the challenges you have with the IRS TIN matching program is that if it is a deceased person's name and TIN, that deceased person's name and TIN will be valid at the Internal Revenue Service, even though the person standing in front of you asking you for to collect a payout is clearly not dead. And so it's good to know whether or not that person is using a deceased person's tax identity. at the very least, if you're not doing any real-time verification, take any database of players that you have and do a bulk TIN matching compliance process. And then actually, so bulk match the ones that you do have records on, update them, so that if you have the repeat customers who are winning on a regular basis, that you know that the name and TIN you have on file for them is correct, and you don't end up in a situation where you have to withhold 30% from their winnings and give that to the Internal Revenue Service. That's a situation none of us really want to be in for backup withholding and reporting. Obviously, once you're under a B notice, you really need to have a process, preferably an automated process, for doing B and P notice processing, handling the receipt of the notice, identifying who needs to be mailed, what mailing package you have to send out the door. I know very frequently, this question came up yesterday, very frequently you don't have a valid address for somebody if they gave you a false identity with their name and TIN. Like it or not, you still have to attempt to mail to it, even if you know it's a bad address. 123 Main Street probably exists in some state somewhere. So you have to do the mailing, and you have to process the solicitations and receive them back and identify that you made the attempt, so the IRS knows that you've properly attempted to do that. All that information feeds into your abatement process. As a note, there were very little reporting to changes to 1099 miscellaneous this year. The 2013 miscellaneous got a date change and the instruction changes that go along with that, but nothing else that was substantial. The same is true for the 1042-S form for 2013. For those of us in the community, if you've got a foreign national that you made a payment to, there's some instruction changes. There are a couple of new income codes, but they're not relevant to the gaming industry. Mostly have to do with the new requirement to report interest to non-resident alien recipients of interest right now. So really, from our standpoint as an industry, you saw a tax year change and some text changes on instructions. So whatever process you're using, if you're using Resort Advantage and Convey, you should be, we'll be updating the form to reflect these changes. If you're using somebody who's not Resort Advantage or Convey, you should be making sure that they're doing the same. W2G is the same story. So from a regulatory standpoint, we haven't seen a 13G yet, but we're not expecting any substantial changes to the W2G either this year. So as an industry, we've been pretty untouched by sort of routine changes to tax code. Typically in a year, you'll see maybe one or two minor changes in these forms that we have to accommodate. It's looking like tax year 2012 moving into 2013 will be pretty easy for us on the processes we currently perform, W2G, 1042, and 1099 miscellaneous reporting. There are no W9 updates either for 2012. So, they didn't update last year. They changed it, they updated the name. They made a couple of minor tax classification section changes, but there were none really in 2012. So, again, we're looking at a situation where we don't have any substantial changes to deal with. The TIN masking program continues on extension. So if you are producing a W2G or a 1099 miscellaneous, you can actually produce it and not include the taxpayer identification number on the printed copy. That is an optional program. You are not required to participate. Obviously, the purpose of this is to increase security from the individual. So if an individual did give you a proper name and TIN and walks away with a paper copy of a W2G, that person would prefer that that W2G did not hold both their name, their address, and their social security number, obviously for reasons of wanting to protect themselves against identity theft. It is a better solution than those others, than the previous available, where you could actually produce the form and include the full TIN. But participation is voluntary on the part of the issuing or the form issuer. So if you're not particularly thrilled with the idea of having to change your process and you don't want to change what you do and include the whole TIN on the form, you are allowed to do so. It's really just a service option for your customers. So let's spend a minute talking about FATCA. FATCA itself is the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. It came about as a result of actually an individual who was a whistleblower on UBS, and the Internal Revenue Service recently cut him a check for $105 million for whistleblowing, and then promptly sent him to jail for violating U.S. tax law. So he's serving time in jail with this $104 million. I guess it's a better way to serve time in jail than any other option. And so what he did is he identified all of a series of accounts at UBS in their Swiss banking unit that were U.S. taxpayers receiving reportable income where UBS, the Swiss UBS bank, was not actually reporting that income to the Internal Revenue Service. As a result of that scandal, Congress passed FATCA. And the purpose of FATCA, the stated purpose of FATCA, was to collect information on foreign accounts held by U.S. persons. It's going into effect, and it actually phases in between 2013 and 2017. And when you look at the reporting on foreign accounts to U.S. persons, you say, well, what does that have to do with us in casinos? One of the things that we're dealing with is, it's not just about reporting for foreign accounts to U.S. persons. What's happened, and actually the first intergovernmental agreement, the FATCA offered a provision that allowed foreign governments to sign agreements with the IRS on behalf of all financial institutions operating in that country that waives them from any U.S. FATCA reporting requirements. Sounds great. UK signed one with the United States. On that UK agreement, one of the things included in that is an information sharing agreement between the IRS and the United Kingdom, where the UK will provide information to the U.S. on transactions that occur within its borders for U.S. citizens. And as a reciprocal move, the IRS has agreed that they will provide information to the UK on all transactions that have occurred to UK citizens within its borders. The net result of this is going to be a substantial increase in reportable activity for UK citizens by U.S. businesses. So we're going to, as a community in the gaming community, we're going to be required to identify who is a UK citizen and collect additional information on payments to them so that it can be reported to the UK government and taxed by the UK government. The net result is going to come with the best way to think about this right now, because the details, they signed this agreement really like 10 days ago, so we don't have any regs on how the form data is going to have to go around. Probably the best analog to think about this is it's going to be reporting on 1042-S recipients, even for transactions that they were not withheld on. And it'll be for all activity. They'll probably have to add a whole bunch of new income codes to the 1042-S or create a whole new set of forms, which I hope they don't do, frankly. And there's going to be a whole new set of reporting requirements for foreign nationals that we've never seen before. As a community, since we now know we're going to end up having to do it for the UK, it's probably going to end up being easier for us to do it for everybody, whether they're UK or not, and not mess around with what passport they're carrying. So the intergovernmental agreements are really slated to expand reporting by U.S. businesses, not just gaming, but all U.S. businesses, very substantially. And for those of you on the call who've not been spending a lot of time thinking about FATCA, unfortunately, we do need to start paying attention across the board. I have to say this is unquestionably good news for Convey as a business in terms of the fact that you're going to be increasing the number of people who have to report income. But it is rather, frankly, unfair to put the burden of this regulatory compliance, and in this case even foreign regulatory compliance, on the shoulders of businesses, as opposed to having that be something that burdens either the individual receiving the income or at the very least the government who signed the agreement. Actually, and if you're interested, there's a blog post on 1090news.com on the subject of looking at the model of sales tax collection and whether or not we think that model is something we ought to be applying to information reporting and reimbursing those of us who are put in the position of reporting that income for doing the work that the Internal Revenue Service arguably ought to be doing themselves. We also have draft versions of the new W-8 BEN, and they split it into two pieces. One is the BEN and one is the BEN-E. So the W-8 BEN form is the beneficial owner form you collect to document a 1042-S recipient. There is a new one out. They split it into two parts. They took the entity part, meaning businesses and partnerships, and put it in its own form. That simplified the bed that we will typically use for collections or for payments in a casino. So that's actually good news for us. They simplified the form that we have to file. The bad news, I guess, that goes on the other side of that is it looks like they're going to make us file a lot more of them. So we really need to be aware this is going on. There are no regs out yet, but we need to be aware so we can be prepared. It's not, unfortunately, a situation where we can get away with not having to deal with it. This is, in my opinion, this is coming. It's a matter of, not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when. And the more educated we can be leading up to that, the better off we're going to be. You don't need to read this graphic. This graphic actually shows you the complexity involved with the FATCA regulation phase-ins that are already defined. If you were a bank, you would be looking at this table and working out for every one of the boxes in this spreadsheet, you'd be working out a process and a procedure to deal with it. Those of us in the gaming industry, we're not going to be this complicated. The intergovernmental agreement with the UK looks like we'll have a 2014, tax year 2014, so January 2014, a year from January data collection start date. But that's still pending any regulation, so we don't know for sure when that's going to happen. The next set of regs on FATCA that we're expecting is going to be actually in the month of October, when the IRS will be giving us our reporting rules for recipients under FATCA. And then that recipient reporting under FATCA is actually stacked on top of recipient reporting under traditional 1099 reporting. So this is a new layer of information reporting that we have to be aware of and keep track of. The IRB is out, so additional items. So this is sort of now the miscellaneous stuff. In 2012, the 1220 came out. For 2012 IRB is out. We are waiting on the final regulations, but it does not look at this point that there's any substantial changes to the 1220 that would be impacting our market. In 2013, we're keeping an eye out for the 2013 forms so they can become available so that we can cut over and have them available for customers in January. As you noted, in my presentation, the miscellaneous is out and the 1042S is out for 2013 already. So you should be looking at those now to see if you have to make any process changes internally. The forms themselves, like I said, you saw date changes, you saw the instruction changes, and that's it. So I don't expect you'll see any, but the 2013 form for the W2G we are still waiting on. From our early conversations, we're not expecting any substantial changes, but it is possible. So keep your eye open for a notice from us. We'll send an email blast out if we get something that has a major change. And then, obviously, we want to start the process of testing for 2013 data forms and processing.
Great. Thanks, Jeff, for that information. I am now going to introduce Brian Farilla with Resort Advantage, and Brian will take you quickly through their automated compliance process. Brian?
Great. Thanks, Melanie. Good afternoon, everyone. Melanie, will you help with the mouse click, please? That'd be great. Start there. So just as a follow-up to everything that Jeff has been talking about regarding IRS compliance and some of the changes coming up for 2013, I thought it'd be helpful to circle back and just redefine how does this get done on the property floor as things are moving faster and faster towards real-time information and the need to collect information correctly and accurately up front while the patron is there doing business with you. What we wanted to try and accomplish today was focus not only on the IRS element of that, but just the overall methodology for collecting reportable transactions. And what you see on the screen here now in the blue canister is where we're going to start with. That essentially is the database or the container that maintains all reportable transactions for your property that are considered compliance-related reportable transactions. And those fall into three categories. You have your FinCEN reportable transactions, which are your traditional Title 31 transactions. Your second category is your IRS reportable transactions, the W2Gs, the 1099Ms, the 1042Ss that are required according to some of the guidelines Jeff had noted. And then the third category of transactions that are managed within that canister are any property-specific transactions that are essentially reportable to yourselves, things that fall within and outside of your risk profile, particular scenarios that are important to your property to monitor and maintain. And that information is accumulated from a variety of sources as your gaming day progresses. Another quick, Melanie, please. We have information that comes from your various internal business systems, your patron management, table games, slots, cage, and you can see that different types of transactions can originate from that source or those sources. We have obviously FinCEN reportable transactions coming from there. We have prize and promotion winnings. We have slot jackpots. We have a variety of IRS reportable transactions that come from those systems, as well as that third category, which are property specific. Next, Melanie. In addition to that, we have information considered reportable from external sources, cash advance and check cashing. All that information is being accumulated, and the whole idea of making that information available to your whole floor staff on a real-time basis really is what's going to drive the collection of information, not only to ensure we're preparing and providing complete and accurate FinCEN forms, but also complete and accurate IRS forms, which are driving through the convey compliance process all the way through to the IRS. Next, please. That activity that's going on all day, every day, whether it be related to FinCEN transactions, IRS transactions, or other transactions that are being monitored and reported, those can drive actionable activities from your security and surveillance staff or other departments. Next, please. From the back of house perspective, each and every gaming day, those reportable transactions are being accumulated real time. They're being made available to your staff on the floor, but the folks in the back of house are special in the sense that they have the entire history of all reportable transactions for every patron in the FinCEN category, the IRS category, and in property-specific category at their fingertips for their analysis and then ultimately for their filing to the appropriate government body. Next, please. So the last element of this slide here in the complete process is to then take that information that's being accumulated in that regulatory reportable transactions canister, assemble them into the appropriate envelopes, pass them through to IRS and FinCEN to complete your electronic filing process. That entire flow that you see on that screen today is really oriented towards minimizing the cost of the business process, minimizing your risk, and ultimately eliminating the fines that Jeff was referring to, not only from the IRS perspective, but in the case of RA from the FinCEN perspective. Next slide, please. Talking about 1099 specifically, when we look at prize and promotion and other IRS-related transactions, one of the experiences that we've been able to glean from properties is the fact that they're collecting information about prize and promotion winnings separately from some of their existing processes. Most systems today are collecting the jackpot information effectively, so W2Gs and 1042Ss are being accumulated. However, the activity around prize and promotion sometimes isn't always managed to that same level of reliability and robustness. So what we've decided to do is to help properties with that. And what you see on the screen here is a mechanism for the folks on the floor and or, next click please, and or the folks in the back of house to essentially initiate those transactions right within our application in real time as they happen on the floor. So if someone wins a prize or a promotion, airline tickets, whatever it may be, your staff, whether it be front of house or back of house, can initiate that transaction right into Resort Advantage. And then that information is captured in that reportable transactions database. And then from that point forward, next slide please. Next click, we'll actually see that we monitor the content of that patron's year-to-date prize and promotion information automatically for you. And as that patron accumulates from January 1st, midnight, all the way through the balance of the year, as they accumulate past some of those government reporting thresholds for 1099s in this case, we're automatically then letting your floor staff know that this person is due to have a real-time verification performed, because we know they're going to have a 1099 required at the end of the year. We'll verify that we have all the correct information on file. We'll verify we have a W-9 if required on file. So all of that is happening real-time on the floor with all your patrons so that we don't miss an opportunity to have that information complete, current, accurate. And again, as I said at the beginning, this move towards more real-time visibility and verification of patron information is really helping to drive this process. That data then, as you can see, flows from the Resort Advantage regulatory database into the Convey Compliance Taxport database, where it's gathered along with any of your information from your vendors, so that we have the opportunity as the year goes on to continuously update and enhance and revise the content of any 1099 related transactions alongside with any W-2G and or 1042-S activities. And then Taxport comes in to take that information, concatenate it together, file it with the IRS, and then the last click, please, gives you the opportunity to produce those forms for your patrons and vendors. So this process becomes a very tightly automated flow that not only eliminates a lot of the cost in the process, but ensures accuracy, expedites the process, minimizes corrections at the end of the year, and much like the W-2G activity, really helps to reduce the likelihood of not only fines coming back, but also dramatically reduces the likelihood of any B notices in the future. Next, please. So as we kind of wrap up, one of the things that Jeff mentioned early on was this whole idea of patron validation. Next, please, Melanie. One of the things that you'll see we can provide to your floor staff is the opportunity right from the floor within Resort Advantage Floor Monitor to perform that real-time verification of a particular patron social security number, do an OFAC status and or a death master list verification. And in the situations where the IRS is not available, because that does happen, where their servers are not available, we do some things that are very unique as well. We'll actually take that result, that unavailability result, and we will queue that particular verification to be redone as soon as it becomes available again, as soon as the servers are back up. So we've built in a lot of fault tolerance into the process so that your staff can initiate the process. They can be assured that after the fact, if there's any issue with the process from the government side, it'll be retried again and again until it's completed, and then that ensures that you've completed your due diligence to the best of your ability. So I guess with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Melanie. I just want to make sure everybody had an overview of how we can actually make that process come to life on a real-time basis on the floor, and how we can leverage and integrate the capabilities of Convey's tax form filing and real-time verification capabilities of the patrons out on the floor into the Resort Advantage environment. Thank you, Melanie.
Great, thanks a lot, Brian. We do have some questions, and like I said, to respect everybody's time, we've got 1 minute left. I'm just going to read a question that I think everybody probably really wants to know. Jeff, can you answer this? How do I do TIN, OFAC, or DMF verifications through the IRS? Can you explain that process?
So there is no mechanism for OFAC or DMF verifications through the Internal Revenue Service. You have to acquire those separately. So the OFAC list is provided by the Department of Treasury quarterly. So you can go and actually download the table of OFAC individuals quarterly if you want to do a manual lookup yourself. The DMF list is published by the Social Security Administration, and that's updated monthly. And you can go pull a copy of the Death Master File list from the Social Security Administration website, also at no charge. And the IRS TIN matching program, you can sign up for the TIN matching program, and you can give them some information about yourself, and then they will send you a login. And you could go to the IRS website and manually look up the individual on the IRS website. Now, from RA and Convey's perspective, we believe that that's doing manual lookups in 3 different databases is probably not the most efficient use of your time, especially if you're on the floor and want to get that individual back and playing. And so in those situations, we would recommend you look at buying a solution like the ones we offer that combine all of those verifications into a single check and run that and manage that for you.
Okay, thanks, Jeff, for clarifying that. That will conclude our webinar for today, and I'd like to thank again our audience for joining us. If you'd like further information on anything you've heard in this presentation today, please contact either Convey Compliance or Resort Advantage at the phone numbers or website addresses that you see on your screen. Again, thanks to everybody for joining us today, and have a great day.